All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. Drew Allen behind the microphone. It's been a while, I understand. I was away a lot longer than I planned. I'll say something about that, and then I'm not really going to say much else about it. Everything's fine, by the way. I was dealing with family stuff. Important things came up that I had to deal with. That's about most of what I'll tell you today. Maybe someday I'll talk about all of it. I probably will because it will be relevant, and maybe I won't, because this is not a show about my personal life, and I don't ever want it to become one. What I'll tell you is everything's fine. It's better than fine, actually. What happened over these last months for me was a period of transformation, and that transformation was a long time coming, and it needed to happen, and I came out the other side of it in better shape than I went in. And I'll tell you the other half because you've got it coming. Every week, I intended to come back. It's been a little over a month since I've done a show. That's never happened in all the 5 years I've been doing this. And I'd tell myself, next Monday, and next Monday would arrive, and I'd know that I didn't have it yet. Not the material. There's plenty of material, but I didn't have the focus. I wasn't going to come back to you at 50%. I respect you way too much for that. You give me an hour of your life. You put this on in a truck, in a kitchen, on a treadmill, in traffic, live, like some of you are watching now. And that's time that you don't get back. You don't deserve half a man's attention in exchange for it. You deserve Drew at 100%. And you deserve nothing from me until I've got 100% to hand you. So I waited, and now I'm here. Now, what I saw out there as an observer is the reason this show is a little bit different this afternoon. When you're in this every single day, you can't really see the full shape of it. You're kind of a fish, and fish don't notice water. And every fight, I realize, looks like the biggest fight there has ever been because the one in front of you always does. But if you step back for a month or so, as I did, and you come back, you can see the current. And I'm going to tell you what I've observed. Distraction, wall to wall, around the clock, relentless distraction, infighting on our own side that would embarrass a middle school, 10 controversies a day, every single one of them, of course, urgent, every one of them forgotten by Thursday. Good people, smart people, people I like and respect, spending the most consequential year of their political lives arguing about a podcast, for one. Now, I'm not going to, sit here behind the microphone and tell you there's a room somewhere where men sit down and plan that type of bombardment. They plan to freeze you with the constant barrage of BS. There probably is somebody behind the scenes, but I can't prove it. What I'll tell you is that this machine that you all observe produces it so reliably that it may as well be designed. And the effect on you is identical either way. Because what that bombardment does, as I was starting to describe, it isn't there to convince you of anything. It's there to leave you shell-shocked, overloaded, standing in the middle of the road with your hands down by your sides, frozen. And look, I sat with that a long while before I came back in here because I don't think most of us have language for it. It doesn't feel like being manipulated. It feels like being tired. And we cannot be frozen, not this year, not with 78 days on the clock. And frozen is a decision. It's a decision that gets made for you by people who benefit from you making that decision. And the answer to it isn't more information. You've got plenty of information. You are drowning in information. The answer is action, something specific, something real every single day. So this show has a mission now. And I'm going to say it out loud so you can hold me to it. I've been doing this a long time, and I've never, in all those years, been clearer about what I'm for than I am this morning. I am not going to be distracted. I'm going to spend your hour or whatever time we have together on on what matters. I'm not going to spend it on, what's trending at 8 a.m. And most of what I intend to do is teach, because I've come to believe the reason we lose arguments we ought to win is that our side has gotten extremely good at being angry and extremely bad at explaining. And we are the tip of the spear. And I don't mean this show, okay? I mean you, the man in the truck who can explain to his nephew at a dinner table in 90 seconds why a rent freeze raises rents. That's the tip of the spear. That is the only thing that has ever moved this country, and it is the only thing that ever will. There is no cure for what ails America sitting in a studio. The cure is a citizen who is not frozen. All I can do is hand you the ammunition and get out of your way. So let's get to work. Monday, August 17th, I'm Drew Allen. It is so good to be back. And I'm going to start by spending 11 minutes-ish on precisely the kind of thing I just told you I won't spend time on. Now, I'm doing it on purpose, and I'm doing it once to show you what distraction costs before you stop paying for it. Friday morning on Patrick Bet David's podcast, Candace Owens debated a man named Andrew Wilson about whether Tyler Robinson shot and killed Charlie Kirk. You should know where I'm standing on this, of course, before I say any more. I was Charlie Kirk's publicist, didn't know him personally. I wrote a book about Charlie Kirk for Christ and Country, The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. And that book wasn't, trying to prove that it was Tyler Robinson or anything else. It was an indictment of the culture of hatred that claimed Charlie Kirk's life. It was the demand for accountability from the left, who repeatedly, through their rhetoric and the actions of their lunatic followers, do engage in these types of violent activities. And this one killed Charlie Kirk. And it's about what Charlie Kirk stood for and where we need to go from here. It's an important book to read now more than ever, perhaps. So, I had never heard of Andrew Wilson, who debated Candace Owens, in my life. I didn't hear about him until 3 days ago. I still don't know that much about him, and I'm going to come back to why that matters. But there were 4 moments in that thing, the debate, worth knowing about. So let me give you those before I tell you what I think. So this first moment, Bet David asked both of them, Candace and Andrew Wilson, a scale question, 0 to 100. What's the likelihood Tyler Robinson shot and killed Charlie Kirk? Let me see if I've got it here. All right, here we go.
Just out of curiosity, are you between 0 to 100? What is the likelihood that you think Tyler Robinson shot Charlie Kirk and killed him?
Based on the evidence right now, I don't know. I'd say 75, 85%.
Candace?
0%.
0%.
I'm at 0.
So
with what we've seen in terms of the evidence, I'm at 0%.
So not only, that maybe somebody was behind him as a patsy influencing him. You're not even saying that he didn't even shoot Charlie Kirk.
Right. I would, if you said, was he involved that day, as I have consistently said on my platform, I would say yes, he was. I don't know.
All right. So Wilson said 75 to 85%. I think he just said, and then Candace Owens said 0. 0%. Not there are questions I'd want answered, which is a position a reasonable person could hold. No, it's 0. Now, second moment, and this is an important one. Wilson asked her the question the country has been asking for 11 months. Do you have any positive evidence, any at all, that Israel killed Charlie Kirk? Here's that clip, or part of it. It goes long.
Go ahead.
Now, you have stated multiple times that you believe that Israel's involved in the death of Charlie Kirk.
Can you give me...
Yes, we can pull up the clip. I'm sorry. I'm just saying.
Can I finish the sentence?
Go ahead.
Can you give me the context for what are you talking about? Like when I say, generally speaking, why people think that Israel's involved? Mm-hmm. Okay. Where's your question?
Yeah. Do you have any positive evidence whatsoever that Israel killed Charlie Kirk?
Well, I couldn't say Israel was on the ground and shot and killed Charlie Kirk. I would say that there are various things that we're trying to establish, one being a motive. And since I don't believe that Tyler Robinson and his transferee is a convincing motive because he was fired up about politics, which Lance testified that he never spoke about with him, nor do I believe that he was so into LGBTQ issues, since Lance testified they never spoke about LGBTQ issues, that he stopped and ate at Chick-fil-A, which if you are into LGBTQ issues, wouldn't be your lunch before you go kill Charlie Kirk for LGBTQ issues, because,
Yeah, but do you have positive evidence?
I'm answering the question as I feel like I want to answer it. Like I said, you don't get to, for an hour and a half, pepper
But the question I'm
questions and
asking
tell
is
me.
about positive
I'm
evidence.
telling you that in any case, establishing a motive and what.
So it's kind of incredible. Her answer is that, she couldn't say Israel was on the ground and shot and killed Charlie Kirk. She effectively says, she's just establishing a motive. Motive, not a document, not a witness, not one thing you could hand a jury. Motive. And so for her, she thinks Israel's evil and hates Israel or whatever. And so he had an issue with some of the things going on in Israel, and therefore Israel killed him. But she can't look at all of the actual examples of left-wing political violence in this country, especially from the radicalized, violent portion of the transgender community, which has committed acts of violence, political violence. And she simply dismisses that as an option at all. He was put on hate maps. Charlie Kirk was, his organization was. No, there's no motive there. And then moment 3, afterward, Wilson rated his own performance a 7 out of 10 and rated hers a 3, saying she had no evidence-based positions at all, which is true. Alex Jones went out. He declared Owens the winner. Bet David declined to name a winner and posted that the people won today. And Nick Fuentes, and I never thought I'd cite this man for anything really, called the whole thing unwatchable and said Charlie Kirk had become a background character in a soap opera. And I'll tell you what, when Nick Fuentes is the one who notices the dead man went missing from his own murder, something has gone badly wrong. And moment 4, which is, the only one that will still matter in a year, I suppose. Candace Owens called it a great win and said there would be much more to say on Monday. Which is to say the debate didn't end the content, it restocked it. She walked in with a theory she couldn't support and walked out with a week of programming. Set that 0% of Candace's next to what the state of Utah put into an open courtroom on camera in Provo last month across 5 days of testimony. Robinson's DNA on the recovered rifle, that was confirmed on the defense's own cross-examination. Their expert, their questioning, surveillance video of a man crossing that roof, carrying something, lowering himself down, going into the woods. A vehicle stopped by an officer on a campus road that night, registered to Tyler Robinson and his mother. A note prosecutors say Robinson left, in which he wrote that he had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and he took it. Testimony from his roommate, and the video of the shooting itself played in open court in front of his family. And that's not even the whole file. That's the part the public has been allowed to see. And on Friday, a woman, Candace Owens, went on a podcast and said the likelihood that the man they charged did it is 0%. She was paid $300,000 to say it. That's not my accusation. It's the agreed public record by both their accounts. Wilson went on Joe Rogan's show and said he'd offer her $300,000. She countered at $500,000. She settled at $300,000. Understand what that money was, because people keep getting it wrong. It wasn't a prize. It wasn't prize money. Nobody won it. It wasn't a purse. It was an appearance fee paid to her to walk out on a stage. And in this case, so let's talk about what kind of person does this, because we've all gotten too comfortable pretending this is a disagreement about evidence. For 11 months, a woman has built an audience and fortune on the murder of a man she called a friend. Not just the murder, the widow. She has a multi-part series aimed at Erica Kirk. It's called Bride of Charlie. And Erica Kirk has had to answer for these theories on television, in public, over and over, while running an organization and raising 2 small children in the worst year any human being can have. Remember when Erica Kirk was asked at a CBS town hall what her message to Candace Owens was? She gave a one-word answer. Stop. That's the whole quote. Stop. That's it. That's all I have to say. Stop. And I want you to hold one more thing next to the $300,000. Back in December, Turning Point offered to put her on a live stream and go through her claims one at a time in public for free. She said she had a scheduling conflict. They went ahead without her. Free, she was busy. $300,000, she cleared the calendar. She negotiated over Charlie. And when she got there, on a stage she agreed to at a location she chose with a moderator she personally approved and publicly praised his fare, and the question finally came, the answer was motive. There's nothing conservative about that. There's nothing Christian about that. There's nothing brave or dissident or truth-seeking about it. Grief is the raw material, and the ions is the product, and I don't have to speculate about anybody's heart to say so. I can read a transcript. 0%, $300,000, motive. But there's something I haven't heard one person say since Friday, and I've been listening for it. Maybe I missed it. But it's this. That debate should never have happened. I don't mean she lost it. I don't mean she should have prepared better or Andrew Wilson. I mean, it should not have taken place. There should not have been a stage. There should not have been a poster, and there should not have been a countdown clock. And I'm talking about one man in particular because everybody spent the weekend aiming at the two people in the chairs, and nobody aimed at the man who put the chairs there. Patrick Bet-David built that event. It ran on his channel for 3.5 hours under a title card that read, I think it was Tyler Robinson, guilty or patsy. And Bet-David had total control of that room because Owens said herself when she agreed to him, he decides when they go to break. He decides who talks and when. The producers answer to him, her words. But before I get to PBD, I want to walk you through how the price of Candace Owens' participation was set, because it's all public, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. In early July, a man named Brian Atlas, who runs a podcast called Whatever, offered her $50,000 to debate Andrew Wilson, and she said no. He came back and offered $60,000. She said no. Then, on the 5th of August, Andrew Wilson went on Joe Rogan's program in front of the largest audience in podcasting, or one of the largest, and said he'd offered her $300,000 and she wouldn't take it. And within days, she was at the table, countering at $500,000 with a line I'd encourage you to sit with. What's $500K between old friends? She settled at $300,000. So the number that moved Candace Owens wasn't $50,000 and it wasn't $60,000. It was $300,000 offered in front of Joe Rogan's audience. The price went up with the size of the crowd watching the negotiation. And here's the part that few people have mentioned, if any, and it's on the internet right now for anybody to read. Wilson ran a Give, Send, Go to cover that $300,000. It raised $58,000 the first day. Owens called the campaign shameless and compared it to a rich man buying himself an Aston Martin and then opening a GoFundMe. But read the terms of the thing. And folks, I read this twice because I assumed I had it wrong. The page says that if the debate does not happen, up to $300,000 goes to the children of Charlie and Erica Kirk. So those were the two outcomes on the table. $300,000 to Candace Owens. Maybe they split it, I guess. Or $300,000 to Charlie Kirk's two children. She took the debate. And when it was over, PBD posted that the people won today. No, Patrick Bet-David. The people did not win. 3 people won. And I can tell you what each of those people got. Candace Owens got $300,000 or whatever the payout was, an audience that she put at 3.1 million views in the first 18 hours. And she got a fresh week of content. Andrew Wilson got the traffic. He went on Rogan to generate, which is the whole reason he dangled that money in public. And Patrick Bet David got both of their audiences delivered to his channel in a single afternoon, and then got to stand above it and tell everyone the people had won. And something got destroyed on Friday that is important to point out. For 11 months, the institutions of this movement had been doing the quiet, albeit unglamorous, correct thing. Turning Point didn't put her on the stage at America Fest. Erica Kirk sat with her privately for 4.5 hours rather than fight it out in public. People declined to book Candace. They declined to boost her. They declined to hand her the oxygen. And it was slow. It was thankless. And nobody got a clip out of it. And that was working. And then one Friday, one man with a channel undid 11 months of that for a traffic spike. That's what a platform is. When you build a stage and you put somebody on it, you aren't testing her. You're lending her your audience, and you don't get that back. I know the answer to this, and it deserves to be taken seriously because it isn't stupid. It worked. She got 11 months unchallenged, and Friday was the first time anybody put her under oath, so to speak, and made her concede. That concession exists now permanently. And a lot of people might say, isn't that worth something, though? Okay, I mean, the concession is real. It's valuable. I've just spent however many minutes using it, but look at the price. She got $300,000 for it. We didn't extract a confession. We bought one at a premium on a stage we built for an audience we handed her. And every young person watching who's thinking about doing what she did learned the actual lesson on Friday. There are hundreds of them. They all have podcasts, and they were watching very carefully. What they learned was not, don't make claims you can't support. What they learned was that if you make them long enough and loud enough, eventually somebody pays you 6 figures to come explain that you can't support them. That's the incentive we just set up. And it will outlive the clip. And by the way, Andrew Wilson isn't, I'm not his champion. I told you at the top, I've never heard of him before this week. This wasn't the conservative movement holding somebody accountable. This was 2 content businesses that were booking each other. That's my opinion. And before that debate, Andrew Wilson had posted, I believe, that Erica Kirk was too retarded to kill her husband. Now, he was mocking Candace's theory. That was the joke. The widow's too stupid to have done it. And, obviously Owens used it. She brought it up on the stage. She asked him to explain his evidence that Erica was retarded. And on camera in front of millions of people in a debate about that woman's murdered husband, his answer was that he just thinks all women are retarded and that it's normal tongue-in-cheek stuff for him online. So anyway, understand what you were actually watching on Friday. A woman monetizing a man's murder across the table from a man who calls that man's widow retarded for laughs, refereed by a third man selling the whole thing to both audiences. And I understand the temptation. Somebody finally cornered her, and the guy who did it is easy to cheer for, but don't. He's not standing outside of any of this. He built half of it. And 3 people made money off Charlie Kirk on Friday. Only one of them had to sit in a chair to do it. Where this actually goes is a courtroom, not a podcast. And it's going to be September 1st, Provo, Utah, final arguments in the preliminary hearing. And Judge Tony Graff decides whether the case goes to trial. Aggravated murder, discharge of a firearm causing serious bodily injury, 2 counts of obstruction, 2 counts of witness tampering, committing a violent offense in the presence of a child. The state is seeking the death penalty, and Robinson has not entered a plea. September 10th is 1 year, and neither of those dates has anything to do with an appearance fee. And both will still be there when everybody is done monetizing. All right, so that's a good chunk of your life and mine on two content businesses booking each other. And I guess a good number of you spent considerably more time on it this weekend. I did, and that's why I know what it costs. And that's one way to do this business. All right, I want to just change the subject for a second here. This morning, Cumulus and Westwood One announced a new nationally syndicated afternoon drive program, 3 hours weekdays, 3 to 6 Eastern, starting next Monday. It's called the Bongino Report PM, and the first hour of it belongs to Sean Farish. And that's on top of Sean Farish Live, which premiered today on Bongino's Silverlock Network, 1 o'clock Eastern weekdays on Rumble. Now, I don't know Sean well. We're not personal friends. I want to be honest about that because I'm not going to stand here and claim a guy I've had a handful of interactions with. But he matters to me, and I want to tell you why. About 5 years ago, when I was starting out on this path, Sean was starting out too. And there was a show we both used to go on routinely together for an hour at a stretch. And to be honest with you, I cannot remember. I don't mean to offend. It was a great show. The guys were great too. I can't remember the name of the show right now, so I'm not going to make something up. But I remember Sean from those early days, and he was so sharp. And he did the Trump impression, which is now, it's how most of you know him now. And he was funny, and he was just sort of coming up, same as I was. And this is the part of the story that I care about, that ought to be told more than the impression is, because before any of this, Sean Farish, if you've read about this, he sold paint. He worked at Sherwin-Williams, I believe. He sold DirecTV door to door. And that's where I think he figured out the impression worked, because he was doing it for customers at the door. And this guy went from paint sales to national syndication. I don't know if the exact time frame is 5 years, but 5 years ago, he was not famous. And that's when I, got to know him a little bit. And here's what I most admire about Sean. And it's the thing I came back thinking about a lot. He's so authentic. He's the same man today with some fame attached that he was back then when nobody knew his name. He's a person of deep principle. He's a true patriot. And he has been grinding for 5 straight years, that's that I know of, to get to this level. And he did it consistently every day, showing up. And nobody saw that part. Nobody ever does. They see him now. They see the syndication announcement and the network deal, and they think it arrived. It didn't arrive. He built it one show at a time for 5 years in front of an audience that for most of that stretch was very small. So Sean, even though we aren't close, and you may never even hear this, I've been watching you over the years. I'm so happy for you. It could not be more deserved, and there is nobody who has earned it the way you have. You are proof of the only formula that has ever worked in this business or any other: talent, hard work, persistence, and consistency. And brother, we need your voice. And Dan Bongino, he deserves real credit here too for seeing it in Sean and building him a platform. That's not nothing. It's a lot rarer than it should be, in my opinion. So go listen to Sean's show, Rumble, 1 o'clock Eastern, and the radio program next Monday. I can't wait to tune in. And I put that right there after the last segment on Candace on purpose, because those are the two available paths in this line of work. And they were both on the table this weekend. One of them is 5 years of showing up when nobody's watching. The other is $300,000 for one Friday. They both pay, but only one of them builds something or builds anything worthwhile. Which brings me to the thing I actually came here to talk about. Because while the American right spent 72 hours on a podcast fight, this happened, and I wonder how many of you even heard about it. So CNBC and a research outfit called Generation Lab, they went into the field this month, just under 1,100 Americans between 18 and 34. Margin of error was about 3 points. And 46% of them hold a favorable or very favorable view of democratic socialism. 23% view it unfavorably. 2-1 in favor. I went looking for the crosstabs on that because I assumed somebody had botched the question. Nobody botched the question. Then over the weekend, CBS News and YouGov published a national survey about 2,300 adults in the field Wednesday through Friday. Democrats now view socialism more favorably than capitalism, 58 to 32. A 26-point gap inside one of the two parties that governs this country. And the label Democratic Socialist is viewed positively by half of that party. There's a detail in that CBS data I want you to sit with because it destroys the story that we tell ourselves. Socialism polls better among Democrats with college degrees than among Democrats without them. So it's not the ignorant. It's the, yes, indoctrinated, but the credentialed. Now watch the Democrats' own reaction to this news. I want you to watch what the leadership of that party did with those numbers over the weekend. Here is Hakeem Jeffries.
Do Democratic Socialists belong in the Democratic Party, Leader Jeffries?
Well, what I can say is that I do not support defunding the police. I do not support open borders. I do not support abolishing the Senate. We're focused on actually solving problems that hardworking American taxpayers want us to solve, which is to lower the high cost of living in a situation where life is far too expensive in this country. That's the Democratic agenda. That's what House Democrats are fighting to achieve.
Do you think, though, that there is room in the Democratic Party under the tent of the Democratic Party for Democratic Socialists? Is it big enough?
Well, listen, I don't support the DSA agenda as has been articulated by the DSA itself. Now, you're going to have individual members who have been elected in Democratic primaries, and if they are elected in the general in November, will be part of the House Democratic Caucus. It's going to be a broad caucus. There will be progressives, there will be New Dems, there will be Blue Dogs.
That was Hakeem Jeffries yesterday. I believe it was yesterday. And I want you to notice that sequence because the sequence is really what's important to take away. First, he distances himself, right? He does not support the DSA agenda. He does not support defunding the police, does not support open borders, does not support abolishing the Senate. And then having said all that, he gets to the point and the part that matters, right? Members elected in Democratic primaries, if they win in November, will be part of the House Democratic Caucus. And in his words, it's going to be a broad caucus. So he knows. That's the thing. He can recite the agenda. He can tell you exactly why it's wrong. He has clearly read it. And his conclusion is that the people running on it belong in his caucus anyway. That isn't ignorance, right? He's placing a bet. He has looked at 58 to 32 inside his own party and concluded he cannot afford to say no to them. And I can hear a few of you already. Drew, that's a stretch. Fine. Well, he's a politician looking at a number. Well, you tell me what else that is. Tim Kaine on Fox News Sunday, not long before that, was asked whether the party should exclude DSA candidates and said, no, big tent.
The Atlantic, though, has this headline saying the DSA is a parasite. They add if the Democrats want to root out the party within their party, they will need to stop indulging the DSA's constant passive-aggressive attempts to undermine them. This would require prohibiting DSA members from joining their party and throwing out the DSA members already honeycombed within it. Do you think they have a space within your party?
I do think the Democratic Party has always been known, and mostly this is good, sometimes it's not, as a big tent. And so I don't think that somebody says, I'm a DSA candidate, I don't think you should use that to throw them out. Why would you do that? Candidates have to rise and fall on their own merits. And so, you know, whether you're a DSA member or a third-way Democrat or, you know, I just call myself a small D Democrat, people have to put their platform before voters and try to be responsive to voters, and voters get get to judge them, but to have a litmus test that if somebody says, hey, I'm a DSA member, they can't be part of the party, I strongly disagree with that.
I'll comment in just a second, but John Fetterman's the only one who's come out, and he looked at that poll and he called it lunacy. So got to give Fetterman credit. There haven't been many. But the leader of the House, Democrats, he looked at 58 to 32 and said, come on in. And then Tim Kaine, if they're Marxist, communist, socialist, if they win, so he has no problem with it. It's like they can't understand or comprehend the threat, obviously. So I need something from you, if I may be so bold to make this request for the next, 30, 40 minutes. And it's the reason I built this episode the way I built it. Stop laughing at this. I mean that, stop. Because I have watched our side handle this for 10 years now, and the handling is always the same. It's a bunch of purple-haired kids on a campus. It's the gender studies department. They'll grow out of it when they get a job and a mortgage. Every single part of that is now false. There are over 100,000 dues-paying members of the DSA. Before Bernie Sanders ran in 2016, there were about 6,000. They have endorsed 145 candidates in this cycle. They hold the mayor's office in the largest city in America, Mamdani. They have members of Congress. A Democratic socialist just came within a couple of points of the Democratic nomination for governor of Wisconsin. And the second-ranking Democrat in the country said yesterday that they belong in the tent. That is not a campus phase. That is a functioning political faction with a candidate pipeline, a donor base, a media apparatus, and roughly half of one major party's voters behind it. And this next part is the one part, or the whole part, that our side gets wrong every single time. To you and me, this looks insane. Genuinely insane, right? This is an ideology with a body count that runs into 9 figures, that failed in every country that ever tried it, that produced bread lines and secret police and walls built to keep people in. And a plurality of Americans under 35 just told a pollster they like the sound of it. The temptation, when something looks that insane, is to conclude that the people who believe it are stupid or brainwashed and then stop thinking. That is a luxury, and I want you to listen to me carefully. That is a luxury we cannot afford anymore. 46% is too many people to write off. You cannot win an election by insulting a plurality of a generation, and you cannot beat an idea you refuse to understand. So for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to do something that will make some of you uncomfortable. I'm going to explain why they believe it, and I'm going to be fair about it. Then I'm going to show you exactly how to take it apart. Go back to that CNBC poll, because the answer is sitting right in it. They asked those same young Americans about the economy. 45% called it bad. 27% called it really bad. 6% said it couldn't be worse. Add it up. 78%. Half of them expect it to get worse from here. And then the question that explains everything. They asked what their single greatest financial pressure was. The top answer at 45% was housing. Housing. Not student loans, not groceries, not gas, a place to live. That's the number one financial pressure on a generation of Americans, folks. A place to live. Now, we talk about young voters like they're a weather system. So let's describe an actual one. He's 28. He lives in Queens. He pays $5,400 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. He has student debt. He is never going to own the place he's standing in, not on his current trajectory, not ever. And he knows because his parents have told him that they bought a house at his age on one income. He doesn't need a professor to tell him something is broken. He feels it on the 5th of every single month. Then two people walk up to him. The first one says, "The system is rigged against you by billionaires. I am going to make them pay, and I'm going to freeze your rent." The second one says, "The economy is actually very strong. Have you considered learning to code, and have you thought about moving to Ohio?" I know which one of those sounds like it's about him. And that is the lure. It isn't Marx. Almost none of these kids have read a word of Marx and wouldn't last 4 pages. The lure is that somebody finally described his life back to him accurately and offered to do something about it. And this is the hard truth for our side. And I have to say the next part, because if I don't, the rest of this hour is just a waste of time. The complaint is true. Housing in this country is genuinely, structurally unaffordable for a person starting out in a way it was not for his parents and was not for mine. That's not socialist propaganda. That's arithmetic, and every one of us knows a young person living it. The CBS poll found the same thing across the whole country, not just the young. Most Americans now say it's harder to buy a house, harder to raise a family, harder to feel financially secure than it was for the last generation. Most of them call the current economic system unfair in terms of the chance to get ahead. Those are not socialists talking, that's the country. And Gallup has capitalism's favorability at 54%, the lowest they've measured since they started asking in 2010. Among 18 to 34-year-olds, it's 43% positive against 54% negative. And I've concluded something about that, and it took stepping away to see it. We have spent a decade arguing with the diagnosis when we should have been attacking the prescription. Every single time a young person says the system is broken, our instinct is to say, no, it isn't. Look at the GDP number. And every time we do that, we lose him permanently because he knows what his rent is, and he knows we just told him he was imagining it. We are never going to win that argument because we're wrong about it. But we don't have to win it. The diagnosis was never the socialist strong point. They're right about him drowning. Where they are catastrophically, provably, measurably wrong is about what to do next. So concede the diagnosis. Concede it loudly, concede it first, and then take a wrecking ball to the prescription. And you don't have to theorize about the prescription. You don't have to reach for Venezuela, and I'd advise you not to because he'll tune you out the second you do. That's a country he's never been to in a decade he wasn't alive for. You've got New York City, 8 months of it, published in a newspaper. Zoran Mamdani was sworn in as mayor of New York City on the 1st of January, member of the Democratic Socialists of America, doesn't hide it, never has, and I'll give him this much. I'd rather argue with a man who tells you what he is. He ran on one word, affordability. Freeze the rent, tax the second homes, make this city livable for working people again. 8 months of this. Now let's look. Corcoran Sunshine put out the July rental data, and the Post ran it on Wednesday. And it says the average rent in Manhattan is $6,655 a month. It's an all-time high, up 10% on the year. Somebody will tell you that's a luxury number. Penthouses, not real people. So let's break it down. Studios, and I mean studios, $4,088, up 8%, all-time high. One bedrooms, $5,486, up 7, all-time high. Two bedrooms, $8,054, up 13. Three bedrooms, which is a family, $12,228 a month. The median, which is the honest number, $5,295, up 6%. And one more, and this is the one that tells you what's actually happening. Rental vacancy in New York City is 1.49%. That is the tightest since 1968. So why? Because, socialism bad is not an argument. And if you're going to have this conversation with your nephew at Thanksgiving, you need to understand how to explain it. The rent freeze covers roughly 1 million stabilized apartments across the 5 boroughs. If you're sitting in one, your rent didn't go up. That's real money in your pocket. And I'm not going to make fun of you for being happy about it. But watch what happens to everybody else. The building's costs didn't freeze. Property taxes didn't freeze. Insurance didn't freeze. And insurance is up double digits everywhere in America. Heating oil didn't freeze. And that's the same energy market that has gasoline at $4 a gallon. Labor didn't freeze. Water didn't. The elevator inspection didn't. So the operator has a building where half the units are frozen and half are market rate. And he's got a hole in the budget. Where does the hole go? Into the market rate units. Every increase I just read you is in part a bill handed sideways to the tenant across the hall who wasn't lucky enough to be stabilized. Now, the second effect is slower and it's much worse. Nobody builds, nobody converts, and nobody renovates a vacant, stabilized unit to put it back on the market because the renovation can never be earned back. So it sits empty. In a city at 1.49% vacancy, apartments sit empty. That is how you get to 1968. And then you've got the pied-à-terre tax. And I want to explain the real structure of this because most of the coverage I've seen out there is butchering it. The legislature passed May 27th. Hochul, governor, signed it the next day, and it took effect July 1st. It is a surcharge on residential property that isn't your primary residence and isn't rented out. So the empty apartment somebody uses 6 weekends a year. It kicks in at $1 million, and the rate climbs with the value of the place, topping out around 6.5%. So somewhere between 11 and 13,000 units in the whole city we're talking about. Projected revenue is $500 million a year from this tax. Now, the face of this pied-à-terre tax has been Ken Griffin. Because Mamdani filmed the announcement standing in front of Griffin's building at 220 Central Park South, the penthouse he bought for $238 million in 2019. Griffin's bill goes from about $850,000 to a little under $2 million. And look, Ken Griffin is not, I mean, I don't care about rich people, but in this useful example, Griffin is not a sympathetic figure, right? And $2 million on a $238 million apartment is not a hardship for him. Anyone telling you that man is being crushed obviously is not being truthful. But there's something in this, a wrinkle, if you will, that I don't think either side is willing to touch. The city assesses that $238 million apartment at $15.5 million. So New York routinely, this is apolitical, New York routinely values luxury property at 10% or less of what it's worth. So the man the mayor put on the poster has been getting an enormous break from the city's own books for years. And the socialists won't say it because it complicates the villain. Our side won't say it because it complicates the victim. So I'm not crying for Ken Griffin. The problem with this tax is arithmetic. It's not fairness. So let's go through the arithmetic, right? So $500 million a year is the projection, and New York's own comptroller, a Democrat, has publicly doubted it comes in that high. So set that aside. Give them the whole $500 million. Mamdani's budget is $124.7 billion. So $500 million, let's do some math here. $500 million against $124.7 billion is 0.4% of 1%. 0.4%. That's the entire revenue yield of the policy that was sold to the people of New York as making the billionaires finally pay their share. It doesn't fund the free buses. It doesn't fund the city-run groceries. It doesn't fund the childcare. It isn't in the same area code as close. Now, commit this pattern to memory because you'll see it 100 times before November. The tax on the rich is never the funding mechanism. It is the advertisement. The funding mechanism arrives much later, and it arrives for you, not Ken Griffin. Now, Bill Maher, I don't have the clip, but he went after the city-run grocery store proposal recently. His argument was that a government store undercutting private grocers on price isn't competition, it's undercutting. And that it's an idea that has never worked anywhere. That's Bill Maher, who has voted for Democrats his entire adult life. So when your nephew tells you at Thanksgiving that opposition to this is just Fox News talking points, that's the name you say, Bill Maher. Yeah. And then here in California, on the same note, California's about to try its own version. And on Saturday night, Ro Khanna, congressman from California, he accidentally, I think, explained the whole thing. So Ro Khanna posted that the California Democratic Party and the California labor movement have joined him and Bernie Sanders behind a 5% wealth tax on 250 California billionaires. And Khanna's line was that California voters want a Democratic Party that stands up for the working class over the billionaire class. So it's classic class warfare. So this is Proposition 40. It's on your ballot in November if you live where I live. And Mark Cuban read that post. Now, Mark Cuban, before I quote him, I have no love for that man whatsoever. Mark Cuban was a Kamala Harris surrogate in 2024. He did the whole tour. He sat across from Rachel Maddow, and he warned America that Donald Trump was going to come after business leaders he didn't like. Cuban spent that entire campaign lending his credibility as a businessman to the people who are now coming for businessmen. He is, on the politics, a complete fraud, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But on this, Cuban is dead right, completely right. And it matters that you understand why, because it's the single best explanation of this policy anybody has produced. And it came from a man with no incentive to help us. The word is illiquid. Illiquid. So a startup founder owns a company. Investors priced it at $10 billion. So on paper, he's worth $2 billion. In his checking account, he's got maybe 80 grand and a car payment, same as anybody. Sacramento walks up and says, 5%, please. You owe us $100 million. He doesn't have $100 million. He's never had $100 million. What he has is stock in a company nobody can sell because it isn't public, because there's no market for it, because the only reason it's worth $10 billion is that a room full of people in Menlo Park said so 18 months ago, and nobody has tested it since. So Cuban's conclusion was that only an idiot founder stays in California. And then Cuban went on, he said, and this is the sentence that should have every economic development office in this state of California on the phone this morning. He said he would make not being in California a prerequisite for an investment. So Khanna comes back with a solution. And I'm going to read it to you word for word because I think it's the most revealing sentence written by an American politician this year, and I don't believe he knows it. He says, why not a non-recourse loan for pledged stock as collateral for this situation? Now, I'll translate to English for you, right? So the government taxes you on money you don't have. Then the government lends you the money so you can pay the government. And you pledge ownership of the company you built to the government as collateral. That's what he's saying. Run it forward 5 years. The company goes sideways, which is what most of them do because that's what a startup is, and the stock is worth a third of what was pledged against it. Who's holding the paper? The state of California is holding the paper. The state of California now owns a piece of your company. There's a word for that arrangement, and you know the word. And it's amazing because, Gavin Newsom is against Prop 40. Gavin Newsom, the most visible anti-Trump Democrat in America, who I don't want to give him much credit, but he can read a spreadsheet, apparently. He knows the top sliver of filers in the state pays something on the order of half the income tax revenue. And the most recent IRS migration data already shows California losing taxpayers on net. So when Ro Khanna tells you this is the working class against the billionaire class, the Democratic governor of California is standing over there telling you the arithmetic doesn't work. And here's the final kind of portion of this, piece of this. Let's meet the people selling us this socialism, because there's another pattern here. And it's another one that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Start with the Michigan Senate race, because the Free Beacon published this morning, and it is a thing of beauty. Abdul El Sayed is the Democratic nominee for United States Senate in Michigan. DSA aligned, Bernie endorsed. He campaigns on building a tax system that's fair for working people and makes billionaires pay their fair share, right? That's the talking point. And his own website says the ultra wealthy should no longer be able to hide behind loopholes. Well, his latest financial disclosure came out. And it says total income, $686,000. That puts him in the top 1% of Michigan earners. $686,000. He runs his consulting and speaking money through an LLC. He paid himself a $64,000 salary out of it, and then took $103,000 more as what's called a member draw. 3 accountants told the Free Beacon what that structure is. If you take the whole $167,000 as salary, you owe 15.3% in payroll tax on all of it. Social Security, Medicare. So run it. This is good accounting, but run it as an S corporation instead. You pay yourself a small, reasonable salary, and the rest comes out as profit and skips the payroll tax entirely. And I have no problem with this. It has a name. It's called the Gingrich-Edwards loophole. John Edwards used it in 2004 and got hammered for it. Newt Gingrich used it in 2012 and got hammered for it. Barack Obama tried to close it, and he failed. And actually, I think Sheldon Whitehouse has a bill to close it right now this year in the Senate. El Sayed wants to join. And to be clear about what it's dodging, the payroll tax funds Social Security and Medicare. So this is the check that pays your grandmother. And Al Sayed has refused to release his full tax returns. He put out 2 pages and left out Schedule 1 and Schedule E, which happen to be the 2 forms that would show S corporation income. His wife is a psychiatrist. Her private practice doesn't accept Medicare. It doesn't accept any insurance at all. He's a proponent of Medicare for all. And he owns 3 rental properties. He's a landlord. The socialist is a landlord. 2 of these properties are overseas, one in Bangalore and one in Dubai. In what the developer's own marketing calls a resort-style luxury community. Folks, I couldn't have made that up. I'm not clever enough to have made that up. So the arithmetic of the modern American socialist is this, right? Top 1% income, an S corp to deduct the Social Security tax, a wife whose practice takes no insurance, 3 rental properties, one of them in a luxury resort community in Dubai, and a campaign platform about making billionaires pay their fair share. Now, be careful here, because there is a cheap shot version of this, and it's not the one I'm making. It's not that he's rich. Plenty of people I admire are rich. It's that every one of these arrangements is a legal, sophisticated, entirely capitalist way to protect what he's earned from the government. He knows exactly how these systems work. He uses them expertly. He wants his own money to be safe and outside the country and unavailable to the tax collector. He just doesn't want that for you. Now, another one, and he's the single biggest media voice on the young left, Hassan Piker. Have you heard of this guy? Democratic socialist, aligned with the DSA wing. He's out on the trail campaigning for Abdul El Sayed. Well, in 2021, there was a data breach at Twitch, not an estimate, not a rumor, an actual leak of the payout records. And it showed that over 26 months, Hassan Piker had been paid $2,800,000 by Twitch alone. That's about $180,000 a month coming in from one platform. And in August of that same year, he bought a house in West Hollywood for $2,740,000. And he's been asked about that house many times. Piker has. And he has an answer. I want to give you his answer because it's the most revealing thing here. Piker's position is that owning a home does not contradict socialist principles so long as the purchase isn't used for what he calls capital accumulation. Capital accumulation. So there's a kind of owning that's a problem, and there's a kind of owning that's fine. And the line between them runs conveniently right around the edge of his own property. That is precisely what El Sayed did with the S Corp. It's not hypocrisy exactly. It's more sophisticated than hypocrisy. It's a theory of the exception. Remember this, theory of the exception, a worked out explanation for why the rule that applies to everyone else does not apply here. Because at the top of all of this, you have Bernie Sanders, right? Who has spent 40 years denouncing millionaires, but became one selling books about it, owns 3 homes, and this cycle has gone around the country endorsing candidates on the strength of their willingness to fight billionaires, including in Maine, a man whose scandal pile grew weekly. Now, here's why I've spent all this time on this instead of just calling them hypocrites and moving on. Hypocrisy is not the argument. Hypocrisy is a cheap shot. Everybody's a hypocrite about something. And if that's all you've got, you'll lose to the first person who points out that you're not perfect either. The argument is that every one of these men has an exception. El Sayed has an S Corp and a rental property in Dubai. Piker has a theory about capital accumulation. Bernie has 3 houses and 40 years of speeches about people who own 3 houses. And each of them can explain to you at length and in detail why the rule doesn't apply in his particular case. Now, this is what I want you to carry out of this hour. That is not a personal failing in 3 men. That is what this system does every single time it has ever been tried in every country that ever tried it. A class emerges in socialism that is exempt. They had a different store. They had the better apartment. They had the car and the pass and the clinic that worked. Everybody else got the line. The theory always says the exception is temporary and necessary. The theory is always sincere when it's written. It's like climate change. They fly around on their private jets, but we are important. We must be on these private jets to go and give a speech to combat climate change. But there's never once been a version of this where the men writing these theories ended up on the same side of the counter as the people they wrote it for. Somebody always ends up on the right side of that counter, and it is never you. And that's why I've spent so much time today on a man's tax schedule and another man's house. It's not because they're rich. Plenty of people, like I said, that I admire are rich. I don't have a quarrel with a man who built something. But these people know exactly how wealth is built and protected and moved. El Sayed structured an LLC and knows what a Schedule E is. Piker has a worked out doctrine about which kind of ownership counts. These are not naive idealists who've never met a balance sheet. They know the system works. They're using it. And they are selling a different one to a 28-year-old in Queens who has no LLC, no Schedule E, no theory of the exception, and no condo in Dubai to move his money into when it goes wrong. If it goes bad, they're fine. They have an exit, but he doesn't. Now, I've got one more thing to finish up today. It's been a while since I've been here, so we're running a little long today. I think it's warranted. This is the piece I think we've been criminally bad at explaining, and it's the one with the most political leverage in it. I want you to go back to that 28-year-old and his $5,400 apartment, and go back to that CNBC number, 45%. Housing, his single biggest financial pressure. He has been told exactly one story about why. Landlords are greedy, billionaires are hoarding, the system is rigged. But nobody has ever sat him down and walked him through the other half of it. So I want to do it, and I want to end by doing this carefully because I want you to be able to have this conversation without losing him in the first 30 seconds. Okay. Housing price is set by two things: how many units exist and how many people need one. We have spent 30 years making the first number nearly impossible to increase. Zoning, permitting, environmental review, rent control, the whole apparatus. In New York, they've now made it so unprofitable to renovate a vacant unit that units sit empty in a city at 1.49% vacancy. And over the same period, we ran, for 4 years, the largest sustained inflow of people across our southern border in the history of the Republic. Let me say that again. And over the same period, we ran, under the Biden Autopin administration, the largest sustained inflow of people across our southern border in the history of the Republic. Do you know where I'm going with this? You don't need a political opinion to see the problem. You need arithmetic. You cannot add millions of people to a housing market where you have simultaneously made it illegal to build and expect the price to fall. That is a supply curve and a demand curve, and they don't care how, about your politics, I guess. And I want to be careful here because you can ruin this argument by overstating it. I'm not telling you immigration is the only reason housing costs what it does. It isn't. The permitting regime is a bigger factor, and I'd say so under oath. Interest rates matter, institutional buyers matter, construction labor and materials matter. But I am telling you it's a real factor. It's a huge factor. And it's the only one of them that has been completely removed from the conversation because the party that wants your nephew's vote cannot discuss it without indicting itself. Which brings me to what those same people are doing right now. While, he pays $5,400 a month. So a left-leaning outfit called State Futures did a review. And it was reported out through Oregon Live over the weekend. Democrats in blue state legislatures have introduced, get ready for this, 242 bills across 32 states aimed at obstructing federal immigration enforcement. 53 of them have already passed in 17 states. What's in them? Bans on federal officers wearing masks, denying federal agents undercover license plates, barring ICE from using government property, blocking new detention facilities. And separately, pro-amnesty organizations have filed something on the order of 20,000 lawsuits against the deportation effort. 20,000 lawsuits. The general counsel at Homeland Security described the strategy, get enough district judges to do enough things and you run out the clock. So ask the obvious question and ask it out loud because nobody ever does. Why? Why is this the Hill? Not healthcare, not wages, not the housing supply. Their own voters just told a pollster is their number one problem. 242 bills in 32 states in one legislative season on this. I'll give you the two honest answers, and you can weigh them. The generous one. Many of these legislators genuinely believe the enforcement is cruel and they are acting on conscience. Maybe some of them are. Here's the other one. It's that a party which has lost ground with working class voters of every background over 3 straight cycles has concluded that its future depends on changing the electorate rather than persuading it. You don't have to take my word for that. Read what they've written about the coalition of the ascendant for the last 15 years. They wrote it down. It was a strategy memo before it was a conspiracy theory. But what I actually want you to do with this is not outrage. That 28-year-old is not your enemy. He's the prize. He's been handed one explanation for why he can't afford a home, and that explanation conveniently indicts the people his politicians already wanted him to hate and conveniently exonerates the policies his politicians actually run. Nobody has ever laid the other explanation in front of him, not once, because our side has spent 20 years talking about the border as a law and order story and a sovereignty story, both of which are true, and neither of which is about what? His rent. Make it about his rent. Because the man is telling you what he cares about, 45%, housing. He said it out loud to a pollster this month. We're the only ones who can connect his problem to its cause, and we've been too busy talking about anything else. 78 days from this morning to Tuesday, the 3rd of November. The House is 218 to 214 with 3 vacancies, so Democrats need a net of 3 seats. 3. The Senate is 53 to 47 with 35 up and 23 of them ours. They need 4. Not a wave, 3 seats and 4 seats. So this is what I discovered as I wandered through the wilderness away from this microphone for an extended hiatus, dealing with things that needed to be dealt with in my personal life, with my family. This is what I came back with discovering. A woman charging $300,000 to say a murdered man's killer didn't kill him on a stage another man built and profited from. 46% of Americans under 35 favorable on socialism, 58% of Democrats preferring it to capitalism, and the leader of House Democrats saying yesterday, come on in. A socialist mayor who froze the rent and produced the highest rents in that city's history and the tightest housing market since 1968. A congressman proposing that the state of California become a creditor to the companies it taxes, Ro Khanna. A Senate nominee with a Dubai rental property campaigning against loopholes while using one. And a party filing 242 bills to stop immigration enforcement while its own young voters say housing is the thing crushing them. So the discipline for the next 78 days is 3 steps, and they only work in this order. Concede the diagnosis. Say out loud that a 28-year-old cannot buy a house and that this is a real failure and we are not going to pretend otherwise. That sentence costs you nothing and it buys you the only thing that matters, which is his attention. Show him the receipt. New York, 8 months, all-time high rents, a tax on empty apartments that funds 0.4% of the budget. Not Venezuela in 1999. Manhattan in July in the newspaper right now. And then bring him a plan. Build, zone, permit. Secure the border and tell him plainly what that has to do with the price of his apartment. Because if our entire offer is that their thing doesn't work, we lose and we deserve to. A man who is drowning does not care that the rope you're criticizing is frayed. He cares whether you brought a rope at all. Now, I told you at the top that the bombardment is designed to freeze you, and that frozen is a decision somebody else makes for you. So don't be frozen. Pick one of the things I gave you this morning and use it this week. The 0.4%, the 1.49% vacancy, the landlord in Dubai. Use it on one person already on your side and concede his diagnosis before you touch his prescription. That's it. That's the whole assignment. One conversation this week with somebody who disagrees. The road ahead, right? We've got September 1st in Provo. A judge is going to decide whether the Kirk case goes to trial. September 10th, 1 year. And we'll do that show properly. And we'll do it the way Charlie Kirk would have wanted it done, which is forward. September 30th, October 21st, and the 3rd of November. So 78 days, they've got to pitch. And we need to have a receipt. I am Drew Allen. It is so good to be back with you. And no fear, my friends, I am not going anywhere. God bless you all. Until next time.